Yoma, Dafim Lamed Gimel through Lamed Tes. On Daf Lamed Gimel, the Gemara says, Dishun Mizbeach HaPnimi Kodem La Tavas Chamesh Neros. The removal of the ashes from the Mizbeach HaPnimi precedes the removal of the ashes from the 5 lamps of the menorah. My taima. Amar Abaye, he doesn't know. Gemara Gemirna Svar Lo Yadana. I have such a tradition, but I don't know the reason. Rava says the reason is based on a rule of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish said, Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs. We don't pass by the opportunity to do a mitzvah in order to do another mitzvah. So the first mitzvah opportunity you encounter, you have to do that mitzvah. When it comes to these two avodas, the Dishon Mizbeach HaPnimi and the Tavas Chamesh Neros, when he enters the Hechel, Mizbeach Paga Bereisha. The Gemara then goes on to explain how the Mizbeach and the menorah were laid out. So the first mitzvah he would encounter was the Mizbeach. So because of Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs, that's the mitzvah that he has to do first. The Gemara goes on. The Gemara says, Rava says, based on this rule of Reish Lakish, of Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs, we have another halacha. Abure dara totef to aser. You can't pass by the tefillin shel yad on the way to tefillin shel rosh. Hechi avid midra totefta. First tefillin shel yad, then tefillin shel rosh. Dra is tefillin on the yad. Totefta is tefillin shel rosh. So tefillin shel yad precedes tefillin shel rosh. What does that mean? Tefillin shel yad precedes tefillin shel rosh. So Rashi and Tosfos between them bring 3 different explanations. Rashi says it means putting them on. You put on the tefillin shel yad before you put on the tefillin shel rosh. Tosfos certainly agrees that that's true. You do put on tefillin shel yad before tefillin shel rosh. But Tosfos says that's not based on Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs. That's based on a particular halach in Hilchos Tefillin. The Gemara Menachos says there's a special rule in Hilchos Tefillin. The pasuk says Ukshartam la'os al yadecha. First comes tying on the tefillin shel yad, and after that it says va'yulu totafos ben einecha. After that comes the tefillin shel rosh. So that's nothing to do with Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs. That's a specific halach in Hilchos Tefillin. So Tosfos says, Rabbeinu Tam says, in the name of Rav Haigon, that it refers to when you take off your tefillin and you put them away, that you have to you shouldn't put the shel rosh on top of the tefillin shel yad, because then the next time you take your tefillin out and put them on, you'll first encounter the tefillin shel rosh, because it's a last in, first out cue, a LIFO cue. So if you put in the shel rosh last, that'll be the first one you take out, and since you're supposed to put on the shel yad first, because of the Gemara Menachos, you'll have to be maver ala mitzvahs. So that's wrong. So you should put them in such a way that you put the shel rosh in first, and then the shel yad. So the shel yad will be the one you take out first. So you won't be maver ala mitzvahs when you put on the shel yad. Then he brings a third shot. Rabbi Elio says it refers to mishmush. We had earlier that you're supposed to be mamashmesh in the tefillin, so you're not mesiach das. You don't become distracted. So which one are you mamashmesh first? First the tefillin shel yad, then the tefillin shel rosh. All these 3 are brought lahalacha. Again, Rashi's din is true independent of Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs, but all these dinim are brought lahalacha. The way you put your tefillin away, it says the tefillin shel rosh should be put in first, tefillin shel yad on top of them. Mishnah Berurah brings that the Bach and the Taz say they're talking about a long, narrow case, and literally one on top of the other. But the Magen Avraham says that you really should put them. It's better to put them side by side. And when it says that the shel yad should be on top, it means it should be more elevated, slightly higher than the shel rosh. Also, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Shulchan Shlomo, shel yad should be b'tzad yamin. The point is they should be arranged in such a way that the shel yad will be accessed first, whether it's literally one on top of the other, or parallel but one slightly higher, or to the right. But the point is you should set up your tefillin. This is what Rabbeinu Tam said. You should set up your tefillin in such a way that you encounter the shel yad first, so you won't have cause to be maver ala mitzvahs by passing over the shel rosh to get to the shel yad. This din is also brought lahalacha regarding talis and tefillin. We put on our talis before the tefillin. So once again, it says that if you put your talis and tefillin in the same bag, you should make sure you don't put the tefillin on top, because then you'll have to be maver past the tefillin to get to the talis, because the talis goes first. So again, you should put the talis on top in such a way that you'll encounter it first. Mishnah Berurah explains this halacha that Ein Mavirin Ala Mitzvahs is not limited to where you already pick up one thing, that you can't drop it to pick up something else. It's mavur from Aragamara, he says. Aragamara means that whichever mitzvah you encounter first, even if they're in 2 separate places, you have to do the one that you encounter first. So here too he says even if your talis and tefillin are in separate places in your house, but if one of them is in a closer room and one of them is in a One of them is in a different room than the one you encounter first, is the one you do first. All that is included in Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs, that you shouldn't pass over one mitzvah to do another, and therefore, Chachamei Barosho, you should arrange the mitzvahs in such a way that you're going to encounter first the one that you want to do first. These halachas are also brought in Hilchos Shabbos when it discusses breaking the bread on Shabbos. You have Lechem Mishnah and you break one of the two breads. Some people break both, but the common minhag is to break one. So the Beis Yosef brings from Rishonim whether you break the top one or the bottom one. Some say the top, some say the bottom. In Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you break the bottom one. The Rama says that on Shabbos night you break the bottom one, on Shabbos day you break the top one. The Achronim ask, though, the Bach asks, what do you mean you break the bottom one? How could you say you break the bottom one? The top one is the one that comes first to hand. Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs. Since the top one is the one you encounter first, that's a clear Gemara. Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs. These other things about top and bottom preferences are al pi Kabbalah. The Bach says stoutly we have a standard principle that we don't, that we can't be mavir on what the Talmud says in favor of Kabbalah. So the Talmudic rule of Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs overrides any Kabbalistic considerations, he says, and therefore you should always break the top bread because Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs, and we can't follow these Kabbalistic customs. Other Achronim, the Taz and the Magen Avram, they find ways that you can satisfy both. You can do both Ein Mavir and Ala Mitzvahs and still break the bottom one. How do you do that? The Taz says his personal custom is that he puts the bottom one closer to him. So normally, if you have two stacked up in parallel, you would reach the top one first. But if one is closer to you, the bottom one is closer to you, you reach that one first. Magen Avram says that when you hold them in your hands, you hold them. You have two together, and the top one is the one your hand touches first. That's the one you break. But then, before you break it, you flip them and you put the top one on bottom. So then you fulfill the Kabbalistic idea of breaking the bottom one. The Mishnah Berurah brings both these suggestions. On Daf Lamed Daled, the Gemara talks about the Kohen Gadol's tefillah. He went to the mikvah, so they wanted to heat up the water so it wouldn't be that cold. So it says, the Brisa says, they took a shashiyah shel barzel, blocks of iron, they would heat them up on Erev Yom Kippur, and they would drop them into the water on Yom Kippur to warm up the water, to take off the edge of the cold at least. The Gemara asks, how can you do that? You're mitzaref. You're tempering metal, taking hot metal and then dunking it in water. That's one of the steps in metallurgy that helps strengthen the metal, make it stronger. So that's a malacha on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Rabbi says, lo higia l'tziruf. It didn't reach this temperature. You didn't actually accomplish the process of tziruf. Abaya says, even if it's higia l'tziruf, it's davar shem miskavin. You don't intend for tziruf to happen. You're just trying to heat up the water. The Gemara says, really? But we say that the Rabbi Yehuda, at least, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, who's the Tana of this Brisa, says davar shem miskavin aser. Tana yil b'chol terakula aval hacha tziruf drabanan. Tziruf here is only midrabanan, so we're more lenient. So on the one hand, the Gemara says that if metal is higia l'tziruf, if it reaches that temperature, that stage, that is a malacha. On the other hand, the Gemara seems to conclude that it is only midrabanan. The Rambam paskins that if you have a piece of metal, what he calls a gachela shel mateches, so the Rambam says that if you're mischavin l'tzaref, you're chayev. If you extinguish it, put it in water, and you're mischavin to mitzaref it, you're chayev, because that's what metal workers do. He says they dunk it in water, they douse it in water, and that makes it stronger. That's l'tzaref, and the Rambam says you're chayev, daraisa, not just. Our Gemara seems to say drabanan. The Rambam says chayev. The Ravid and the Ramach say, what do you mean chayev? Our Gemara says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's that davar shem miskavin is aser. The Gemara says it's only drabanan. That's why they were allowed to be lenient for the Kohen Gadol, because it's only midrabanan. So the Rav and the Ramach say that the Gemara says it's not chayav. So the Magen Mishnah explains that the Rambam means it depends. If you're mechavin l'tziruf, then it's daraisa. If you're not mechavin l'tziruf, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that normally says davar shem miskavin is aser midaraisa. But in this context, if you're not mechavin l'tziruf, it's not a malacha at all. I'll call upon him, according to the Rambam, if you are mechavin l'tziruf, it is a malacha daraisa, and according to the Ravid, even if you're mechavin l'tziruf, it is only midrabanan. This machlokus got a lot of attention in the last century or two in the context of incandescent lamps, incandescent lights. When they developed the technology of incandescence, which involves passing a current through a filament to heat it up to a very high temperature, and when it reaches a high temperature, the process of incandescence is that some of the heat is transformed into light, and it emits light, and that's how the incandescent lights work. The question was, is that a malacha daraisa of mavir or of mitzaref? Some poskim said it's mavir, it's burning, even though it's not combustion in the sense that it's not a fuel that's being consumed. Some poskim said it's a simple question of mavir because you create great heat and the heat creates light, and that's mavir. But some poskim tried to analyze it in terms of this Rambam and Ravid about whether the heating up metal is called mitzaref. The Sefer Levushay Mordechai, he talks about incandescence, and he says, even according to the Rambam, who says that mitzaref is that if you're mechavin l'tzaref, you're chayev, that's only mechavin l'tzaref. If you're trying to strengthen metal, when you fire up your incandescent lamp, you're not trying to strengthen any metal, he says. So you're not chayev, he says. Even according to the Rambam, pshita, that you're not chayev, because there's no tziruf and there's no intention to mitzaref. This is, however, a big machlokas. Minchas Yitzchak brings, this was a machlokas between the Levushay Mordechai, the rabbi of Med, against the Minchas Yitzchak's father-in-law, Rav Pinchas Zimpbaum of Gros Vardin, that the Levushay Mordechai of Med said only mechavin l'tzaref. If it's not a tziruf, then you're not chayev, even according to the Rambam. While the Rav of Gros Vardin, he said no, tziruf is lav dafka. Any constructive kavana to accomplish something by heating it up is going to be enough to be chayev because of mitzaref. So this was a great machlokas. The Minchas Yitzchak himself is stringent. He says the Achronim seem to hold that any heating up metal is a question of mavir, not just mechavin l'tzaref. The Chazon Ish says if you heat up a filament efshir v'yesh b'mishum mavir l'das Rambam, maybe again. Shlomo Zalman has a discussion at length about this. Is it mavir? Is it not mavir? He's inclined again to say that it is, but it's not so clear. The Chazon Ish says maybe because it's not so clear. If you're not doing it as a metalworking process with intent to strengthen the metal, it's not really so clear whether it is mavir or not. Again, but many poskim, probably most poskim, say that incandescent lighting technology is actually a question of mavir, whether because of mitzaref or for other reasons, it is actually a question of mavir. But not everyone agrees. On Daf Lamed Hey, the Gemara talks about Beis HaParva. The Mishnah back on Lamed Daled said that they brought the Kohen Gadol to Beis HaParva, and he was tov, and he did the Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, and was tovel, etc. He did this in an office in a place called Beis HaParva. What is Beis HaParva? Who is Parva? So Rav Yosef said Parva is Amgusha, a sorcerer. Rashi says he was some kind of sorcerer. Why on earth we have an office in the Beis HaMikdash named after a sorcerer? Very, very unclear. Tosa says in the name of the Aruch that some Chachamim say that this Parva was an intensely curious fellow. He wanted to see the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol. It's not so clear if he was Jewish or non-Jewish, but he wanted to see the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol, so he dug a tunnel. He tunneled underneath the Beis HaMikdash to secretly see the Avodah. The Kohanim caught him. They found him, and they called that office where they found him. Apparently, they called it Beis HaParva. They commemorated his determination by calling that place Beis HaParva. Some Rishonim say they didn't just find him. Some Rishonim say they killed him. When they found him infiltrating the Beis HaMikdash, Rambam says, other Rishonim say that the Kohanim killed him. It's very unclear why they killed him, though. Why they killed him. What did he do that was a capital offense? He was trespassing, I suppose. He was being nosy. He was, maybe wasn't treating the Avodas Yom Kippur with the proper sanctity, but to kill him for this, why was this a capital crime? Very unclear. Apparently the early Mefarshim don't really say. Contemporary thinkers have speculated about it. I saw the suggestion, one sefer brings that it wasn't even Al Pi Din. He didn't even deserve to be killed, but the Perchei Kahuna were just so zealous. They were just so outraged that somebody was doing such a disrespectful thing. They just killed him, and it wasn't actually right. And that's why, as a kind of reparation to him, as a kind of concession to him, because they had killed him without due process, the least they could do was they named the office after him. Again, speculation, but if they killed him, as some Rishonim learn, it's very unclear why exactly he was killed. On Daf Lamed Vav, the Gemara talks about the language of the vidui, the text of the vidui that was said by the Kohen Gadol. It's a machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says that the order, everyone agrees that we talk about chet, avon, and pesha. The question is, what order do we say those three things? Rabbi Meir says we say avisi, pashati, and chatasi. First avon, then pesha, then chet. The Chachamim say, no, we don't say it in that order. The Chachamim say avonos are zidonos, mezid, deliberate averis. Pesha is even worse, even more serious averis, muradim, rebellion, and even more egregious form of chet. But chet is b'shogeg. Chet is the least chomer of all three. So why would you say Avisi Pashati and Chatasi, the Chacham say, that after you talk about the serious Averis, after you talk about the more serious Averis, then you go back to Shogeg, you should be Misvada in least to worst, they say. So the Chacham say that no, the correct way to say it is that the Chacham say the correct way to say it is Chatasi, Avisi, Pashati, Lefanecha, Aniyu Vesi. You go in order of least to worst, and you say Chatasi, Avisi, Pashati. How do we paskin? The Gemara goes on to say that Rav said Halacha Divrei Chachamim, Pshita, Yaakov Rabbi Halacha Rabbim. You might have thought Reb Meir's position is more plausible because the pasuk of Moshe Rabbeinu said, "No say avon v'fesha v'chata." The Gemara brought a number of psukim, but this one is Moshe Rabbeinu in the Chumash itself. Kamash Malan, no, Rav said we pass like Chacham anyway because Yaakov Rabbim. The Gemara said there was a certain shliach tzibur who acted like Reb Meir and said Avisi Pashati Chatasi, and he was challenged and he said, I think Reb Meir is very mistaver because it says that in the Chumash, and they let him go. It's actually a challenge of the Rishonim. We paskin, there is a sheet in the Ritzgeus that because he said that, and when they challenged him, he had a defense, and they didn't challenge his defense. That means we paskin like Rebbe Meir, but virtually all the Rishonim paskin like the Chachamim, and that is indeed what we say in the Avod of Yom Kippur. We say Chatasi Avisi Pashati. That in Musaf, when we say the Avod of the Kohen Gadol, we say Chatasi Avisi Pashati. We also say this, however, in the personal Vidui. The Rambam says that the Iker Vidui of Yom Kippur is Aval Anachnu Chatanu. That we say Avoseinu as well, but we say Aval Anachnu Chatanu, that we say Chet, and the Mefarshim explain it means not just Chet, but Avan and Pesha also. And the Lashon of Vidui of Yom Kippur is Shulchan Aruch Paskin Seder Havidui Chatasi Avisi Pashati, and again because Chet Shogeg, Avan Mezid, Pesha is Mored, and you say Akal Tchila, and the Ramah Paskins elsewhere Iker Avidui on Yom Kippur is Aval Anachnu Chatanu, and the Achronim say Mishnah Berurah brings Chatanu, also Avinu, Pashanu. The Iker Vidui is Aval Anachnu Chatanu, and Avinu, and Pashanu. It's not so clear whether you're supposed to say Aval Anachnu Chatanu, Avinu, Pashanu, which is apparently what some of the Sfardim of the Eidot HaMizrach say. They say Chatanu, Avinu, Pashanu. The minhag of Ashkenaz, wherever I've davened, is that we only say Aval Anachnu Chatanu, but then we say the Hashamnus, and in the Hashamnus, we say, in the Hashamnus, when we get to the letter of Ayin, we say Sararnu for Samach, Avinu for Ayin, and then Pashanu. So Ayin and Pei is Avinu and Pashanu. So we say Aval Anachnu Chatanu, then we add a bunch of other Hashamnus, and then we say Avinu Pashanu. So we indeed say Aval Anachnu Chatanu, Avinu Pashanu, with a lot of other Hashamnus in between. But that's how we paskin, that we say that the Seder we say is Aval Anachnu Chatanu, and then Avinu later, and then Pashanu, whether consecutively or with other things in between. That is indeed how we paskin. On Daf Lamed Zayin, the Gemara talks about how the Kohen Gadol would say the Vidui. Back in the Mishnah on Lamed Hey, it talks about the Vidui Kohen Gadol, and he would say Ana Hashem Avisi Pashati Chatasi Kohen Dromeir Kohen Chacham. You say Chatasi Avisi Pashati, and then he would say Ana Hashem Kaperna, forgive us. He would say Ki Bayom Zeh Yechaper Aleichem. And when people heard Hashem's name, Yotzim Mefarash Mipi Kohen Gadol, so they would say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Li'olam Va'ed. Why do you say Baruch Shem Kavod Li'olam Va'ed? So the Gemara in Lamed Zayin says, Pasuk says, Kishem Hashem Ekra Havu Godel Elokeinu. When someone calls Hashem's name, when someone says Hashem's name, Havu Godel, we all say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. The Gemara brings another drasha, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. The Pasuk says Zecher Tzadik Levracha. The Navi meant, when you mention, normally tzaddik means human tzaddik, but here it means when I mention tzaddik olamim, when I mention HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tnu bracha, say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso b'mavarech Hashem. The Rosh in a tshuva brings in the name of his father, that his father would say whenever he heard a bracha, any bracha, all year, he would say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo. And based on our Gemara, that when you hear Hashem's name, you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo. This is the source of the minhag that we're familiar with, that when a person hears a bracha, when a person hears Hashem's name, he interjects Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. According to Shulchan Aruch, I'll call bracha, any bracha a person hears, any place, he says Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. Now the Gaon of Vilna, the Gra, in his Bir HaGra, he brings the Rosh, he brings that this is based on our Gemara, and that's what the Rosh and the Tur say. However, in the Ma'aser Rav, the collection of Minhagim of the Gra, the Gaon did not think saying Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo was such a good idea. At least not in middle of for Chazaras Hashat for Shemona Esrei. he said that you should not be makbid. He didn't say you shouldn't say it, but he said you shouldn't be makbid, you shouldn't be particular to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. Why? Because the Shliach Tzibur doesn't wait. The Shliach Tzibur keeps on saying the bracha, that Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram. If as soon as you hear Hashem, you're going to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, you're not going to hear the end of the bracha, and you're going to miss Baruch Chazaras Hashatz. So that was the reason that the Gaon gave. Now the Mishnah Berurah addresses this reason. The Mishnah Berurah says you say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, including for Chazaras Hashatz. The Mishnah Berurah says that the Chazan should be careful. He says the right thing is the Shat should be careful not to be so quick to end the bracha. You should give people a chance to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, in order that they should hear the end of the bracha and they should at least know what bracha it is, and they should have a chance to say Amen for the end of the bracha right after the bracha ends. If they say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo while he finishes the bracha, they won't know what bracha he's up to, and if he says the bracha really fast, then their Amen won't be immediately after the bracha. So the right thing to do, basically echoing what the Gaon said, is to make sure that the Chazaras Hashatz takes this into account, gives people a chance to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, but you do say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, but you do it in a way that avoids the Gaon's concern. They bring another reason, though, why the Gaon may have felt you shouldn't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, because he says that you're supposed to listen to the Chazaras Hashatz, and saying Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo is a hefsek, and the tzibur is supposed to answer Amen with a proper bracha with no hefsek, so you shouldn't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, even if the Shliach Tzibur will give you enough time to say. And I believe that many of those who follow Minhagei Agra, my father taught us that we don't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. I believe in Chazaras Hashatz. I believe it's based on this understanding of the Gra, that even without the question of not hearing the end of the bracha, it's a hefsek, and we don't interrupt. At least in Chazaras Hashatz, we don't interrupt. Perhaps any bracha, but at least in Chazaras Hashatz, that we don't interrupt. We say Amen at the end of the bracha. We don't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. There is a major machlokus. The early poskim, the Rosh, the Shulchan Aruch, are mashma that you say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo for any bracha, even if you're being Yotzei the bracha. There are, however, achronim, beginning from the Marash Avuhav, in his Dvar Shmuel, who said if you're being Yotzei the bracha, then again, hefsek is a concern, just like the Gaon said even in Chazaras Hashatz. But the Marash Avuhav said anytime you're being Yotzei the bracha, you hear the bracha of Al Mikra Megillah, Lishma Kol Shofar, Kiddush, you're being Yotzei the bracha, you cannot answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, because you cannot make a hefsek. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo is only for brachas that you're not being Yotzei, but you cannot answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo if you're being Yotzei the bracha. The Mishnah Berurah also recommends this. The Mishnah Berurah says it's like Shemei Ka'ona, and you can't, you're being Yotzei the bracha, Shemei Ka'ona, you can't interject, you can't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. The Mishnah Berurah says, V'diavad, there's basis for leniency, but l'chatchila he says, you should be machmer not to answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, and this is, I believe, the dominant practice. With the exception that the Jews in Morocco had the custom, apparently, they would answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, even to a bracha they were being Yotzei. And some of their Gedolim defended this and said that it was justifiable. Rav Adi Yosef felt very strongly that it was not correct, that the Iker Halacha is like the Marash Avuhav and other poskim who said, you should not say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, and a bracha you're being Yotzei. Others tried to defend them in the Minhagei Morocco. Others, Rav Shalom Massas, the Rav of Yerushalayim, tried very hard to defend the minhag. Rav Adi didn't agree. This is a major machlokes. If there are some Moroccan Rabbanim who justify the custom of answering Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo, even for a bracha that you're being Yotzei, while the mainstream custom is not to do so. So we have three opinions. We have, this whole thing is not a Gemara at all to say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. It's based on a minhag of the father or the Rosh, which is based on our Gemara. The Gaon was very strict. He felt even in Chazaras Hashatz you shouldn't say it, even though you're not strictly being Yotzei. You said your own Shemona Esrei. Even there we should be concerned, either about missing the end of the bracha or even about hefsek. The mainstream shita is that you answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo in most contexts, but not in a bracha that you're actually being Yotzei. And some Moroccan Jews are noheg that even a bracha that you are being Yotzei, you still answer Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmo. On Daf Lamed Ches, the Gemara talks about the tale of Nikanor. The Mishnah on Lamed Zayin had said that Nikanor was a Jew who donated doors for the Beis Hamikdash, and a great nace happened to his doors, and they were maskirinos of l'shvach. He was held in high esteem for what he had done. What's the story? The Gemara brings the story. Nikanor went to Alexandria in Egypt to bring back these doors, and there was a terrible storm at sea, so they threw one of his doors overboard to save the ship from foundering. The ship was still in crisis, the storm still raged. They wanted to throw the second door overboard. Nikanor said he grabbed it, he wrapped himself around the door, he said, You throw it in, you're going to throw me in. You're going to throw me in also, and so then and then the sea stopped its raging, and they were safe. He still felt very bad about the first door that he lost, that he didn't stop from being thrown into the sea. When he got to the port of Akko, then they saw the door was still there, even though it was copper. It should have sunk to the bottom of the water. It was floating. It somehow made it along with the ship. That was the great nace that the storm stopped, and the other door that was thrown in was saved. And some say it was saved because some kind of sea creature swallowed it and spit it out on dry land. Tremendous nisim Hashem did for the Beis HaMikdash, for Nicanor. And that's why the Gemara goes on. It says that all the doors in the Mikdash were eventually upgraded to gold, except for Shari Nicanor, because they had these great nisim that were performed for them, so they kept the original doors. But some say, the Yeshamrim, the Gemara says, because their copper was especially beautiful. It was bright colored, high quality. It shined, it illuminated the surroundings like gold. So some say because they were very nice doors, not because of the nace, but because they were particularly stunning doors. The Meshech Chachma says, Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk, he says, you know why the Gemara brings the Yesh Omrim, why the Gemara brings the more prosaic explanation for the preservation of these doors, and doesn't like the first approach that it was because of the nace? It was because Nicanor would have been wrong in throwing himself into the sea. And there's a rule that when somebody is moser nafsho lamus for divrei Torah, for mitzvahs, the rule is that we have a kind of penalty. That the Gemara says that we don't quote halachas from him. If someone is moser nefesh improperly, then we wouldn't talk about what a great person he is. We wouldn't be maskirin osa l'shvach maybe. We wouldn't preserve the doors and never exchange them. So since Nicanor didn't quite do the right thing, he meant well, but he didn't do what was appropriate. Therefore, Rameir Simcha says, the second town in the Brisa held, that's not a reason for preserving his doors. Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein in Chashukei Chemed brings other explanations for Nicanor's conduct, assuming that he did act correctly. So why was he willing to risk his life for these doors? He brings two other explanations. He says that Rav Elyashiv explains, even though it wasn't one of the three cardinal sins that a person is supposed to give up his life for, but it would have been a tremendous chil Hashem, because he had gone all the way to Alexandria to get these doors, and now the doors are being thrown into the water. So saving the doors created a great Kiddush Hashem, and the Kiddush Hashem and the avoidance of Chil Hashem justified risking his life. The Iyun Yaakov, one of the earlier Achronim, says that the reason Nicanor was willing to risk his life is because of the principle of Shluchei Mitzvah Einam Nizokin. That we had this earlier in Psachim, people who perform mitzvahs are protected from harm. It's a little hard to understand because the Gemara says when a Shchiach Hazeka, when the Hezek is Kavua and Shchiach, we don't rely on Shchiach Hazeka. Comes up in coronavirus. People wanted to rely on doing mitzvahs to not take coronavirus precautions, but most poskim say that if the danger is significant, we don't rely on divine protection. Being thrown into the ocean along with a copper door in the middle of a storm at sea sounds like that would be pretty shliach hazeka, so it's a little hard to understand. But anyway, we have three explanations of Nicanor. Either he did the wrong thing, he meant well but didn't do quite the right thing, or we say that it was to avoid Chil Hashem, which was a good justification to make a Kiddush Hashem, or because Shluchim Mitzvah Einon Nizokin. Rav Zilberstein Kedarko talks about various modern applications of this. He talks about a man who risked his life, or maybe even gave up his life in the Holocaust to save a Sefer Torah. So was that the right thing? Is that justifiable? He talks about a case of someone who risked, during I think a rocket attack, a fire, someone who risked his life to save Sefer Torah from a shul. They wanted to memorialize this by putting a plaque or something on the shul. Do we say that because he did the wrong thing, like Meshech Chachma says, we shouldn't memorialize this, or do we say maybe it wasn't the wrong thing? I'll call upon him that what Nicanor did, apparently the Mishnah says it was l'shvach, and the Gemara says, according to the first shita, that's why they preserved his doors, although according to the second shita, it's not why they preserved his doors. So again, it's unclear if the Meshech Chachma means that shita would say we're not maskirin os l'shvach, and would disagree with the Mishnah, or would say we're still maskirin os l'shvach, but we don't preserve his doors. Not entirely clear. On Daf Lamates, the next parak begins, parak Taraf Bekalfi. The Mishnah describes the Gorel of Yom Kippur. They would have a Gorel, a lot. They would cast lots. They would have two identical Seirim, two identical goats. One was La Hashem, one was La Azazel. They would cast lots to determine which would be which. They would put two things, originally wood, then upgraded to gold, and the Kohen Gadol would stick his hand in and pull out and pull them out. Then one would be the La Hashem, one would be La Azazel. The Gemara makes it clear it had to be done in a way that there would be no cheating, there'd be no that it had to be a fair Gorel. It says that it says that to make sure he was not mechaven, he was taraf bekalfa, he would scramble them so he couldn't know which was which, and it goes on and it says that there was only room for Shnei Yadayim, so we shouldn't be able to mechaven. And again, they did the girl in various ways to make sure that the girl was fair. Rashi explains the temptation to cheat was because it was a siman tov if the one in the right hand if the one in the right hand would be the one that would be Lashem, apparently, but they wanted the girl had to be fair. There's an interesting dispute in Rishonim and Achronim whether a girl is assumed to be a channel for discerning the will of God and has theological and religious meaning, or it's simply a process like we flip a coin to decide who should go first in some context. The Gaonim, a very mysterious passage in a tshuva of the Gaonim said when you make a girl that you must follow it. Nobody has the right to violate a girl. The girl is mipi shamayim, it's from heaven, and someone who violates a girl, ka'over la serasa dibros, it's as though you violated the 10 Commandments. Very, very strange. Why should girl be as profoundly authoritative as a serasa dibros? Hard to understand. Achronim struggle with that. Rabbi Avram ben Arambam. Someone asked Rabbi Avram ben Arambam, what is a girl? How do you do it? What does it mean? So he says, a girl, in Arabic we call it al-kara. He says it's done either with different papers or cards, or with luchos, tablets, he says. But he says a girl is some mysterious way of discerning the mind of God, discerning hidden things, yedias hanelam. We don't fully understand it, einani yodim mevinim es hamitasa, but somehow it's a mystic process that can give us insight into hidden things. There is a famous tshuva of the Halachos Yar. The Halachos Yar talks about people on Purim that were having a girl, that were raffling off a large silver goblet. There were certain irregularities, there was an extra ticket, someone's ticket was missed, and the question was whether the girl has to be redone. What if the person who may have been injured by the absence of his ticket waives it or makes a deal with the winner? So the Halachos Yar establishes the rule that if the procedures were violated, doesn't matter if the injured party says, I don't mind, once the procedures of the girl were not strictly, correctly followed, the whole girl is void, invalidated, it has to be redone. Why? So the Halachos Yar explains, Re'inu min Torah, min Nevi'im, min Ksuvim. There are rayas from all over Tanakh that the girl is a girl that's done fairly with no cheating and no human intervention is reliable, similar to what the Gaonim said. It shows us the mind of God. The Halachos Yar and other Achronim bring a variety of examples of girl in Tanakh. Besides this one, Eretz Yisrael was divided by a girl. When Achan sinned, they found the sinner via girl. The story of Yoma, they cast lots to see whose fault the storm at sea was. Haman, Lahavdil did a girl. So Halachos Yar, echoing the Gaonim, and other Achronim take this view as well, assume that a girl is not just a deal that we make. A girl is a process by which we can gain some kind of real insight into the way things are, into where fault lies, into who is deserving, and so on. And these Achronim say that the Halachos Yar in particular says the girl is a process. It's not just a made-up thing. The girl actually the conclusions of the girl actually have real significance. Other Achronim push back against this. Rav Adi Yosef from Yabia Omer, he says the girl of Chalukas Haaretz, that was Ruach HaKodesh and Urim V'Tumim. That wasn't an ordinary girl. That was based on Hashem. Other rayas also, he says, are not compelling. In particular, Rav Chaim David Halevi argues very strongly against this view of the Gaonim and of the Halachos Yar. He says a girl is just what he calls an inyan heskemi. It's just an agreement we make. It has no meaning. It has no value. It's just a deal that we make to resolve some kind of impasse or deadlock. It does not give us any insight in general into the will of God or the way things are or the way they should be. What about the girl of the Sira Yom Kippurim? He says, no, that girl was Ratzon Hashem. That was a special mitzvah and a special hashgacha of Hashem. This girl, he agrees, was something special. It wasn't just like flipping a coin. This girl is the exception, he says. But an ordinary girl that people, B'zman hazeh, make, they decide to resolve some question via girl, that has no significance, he says. That's just a deal that they make. But again, but the Halachos Yar felt it did, and the Gaonim seemed to have felt so as well. The Gaonim said that one who violates, one who contravenes the outcome of a girl, is as though he violates the 10 Commandments.